Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is St. Louis on the Air.
Some places get almost 13 inches of rain up near St. Peter's. At Lambert Airport, they recorded about 9 inches. Just really depended on where you were.
I haven't heard anything from Red Cross. I talked to FEMA this morning, and they said since it hasn't been declared a national disaster, they're not going to do anything.
Especially when you're, going into work in the dark, things look fine, and then, you go around a corner and all of a sudden you're in 4 feet of water and you can't get out. And that was when we needed to see all of those rescue operations being put into motion.
No one has contacted me from my leasing office, Red Cross. I haven't heard anything.
I'm Rod Milam. St. Louis broke the record for the most rainfall ever recorded in a single day in the city early on Tuesday morning. Flash flood emergencies were declared by the National Weather Service for areas throughout the entire region as more rain fell during a 6-hour period than is considered normal for both the months of July and August combined. And at least one person lost their life during the storm, and large numbers of roads, businesses, and homes were directly damaged because of the inundations. In particular, one particular apartment complex in Hazelwood was hit particularly hard. Right now, we'll hear from Camila Cage. She had to relocate to an emergency shelter in Richmond Heights after her unit was impacted directly by the storm. Camila Cage, under these unfortunate circumstances, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And yes, Camila, just as I mentioned, you live in an apartment in Hazelwood. You were awakened, or you woke up early Monday morning to find water pouring into your apartment. Can you tell us about that experience that you had, and did you have any warning about it?
Well, I did get a severe thunderstorm warning at like 3:30 a.m., but, that's normal here in St. Louis to, get those text messages. So I didn't think nothing of it when I got it. So I just picked up my phone and, ignored it and went back to bed. Around 5:30, I woke up, to get ready for the day, and I just started hearing gushes of water. Didn't know where it was coming from, so I had to get dressed, put in my contacts. I'm blind, so I can't see anything without them. And then stepped into the hallway, and I just heard it louder, and I knew instantly that it was flooding outside.
Wow. And that was the only warning you had. Is that something normally that happens? Does your area or does your apartment complex normally flood, or was this something that was different?
I've been living there since January of 2020, and within 3 months of me living there, it flooded, but it wasn't as bad. I was able to move my car. It didn't affect my apartment. So, I'm thought, okay, well, if they can, catch it in time, I thought we would be okay because the police came around to each unit and knocked on the door, So just last year in 2021, it did the same thing, but it was not as bad as the first time. It was minor, and this time it was like 10 times worse.
And what about your neighbors? First off, are you on the ground floor? Or are you up on the first floor? What part of your complex was hit?
It's only 2 floors, so where I live at is considered the first floor, which is technically the ground floor. Mm-hmm. The second floor wasn't impacted at all, but they all lost their vehicles as well as everyone on the first floor. So they was affected somewhat like us, but our apartments got hit way worse and all the units in the complex got hit, every single apartment building. And
was everybody able to get out okay?
We all got out okay safely. I didn't hear about any injuries or anyone getting hurt or dying or anything, so I believe so.
And where are you right now? Where are we speaking to you from?
I'm with a family member in, I believe this is St. Louis County unincorporated, so off of New Halls Ferry Road.
And what are your next steps going to be? Do you have any idea? I know it's only around 24 hours probably after you had to abandon your own apartment and all of your things.
Well, I just recently talked to my insurance company. I did have renter's insurance, but unbeknownst to me, I didn't know I needed to have flood insurance also. So they just told me they're not going to replace or pay out anything. So I'm completely out of everything that I haven't worked hard for. As far as my car, everything's going, smoothly with them, but I have to wait. There's a waiting period because they were also affected. So they told me August the 10th is when I will be able to get a rental. So I'm just taking it day by day.
And right now you're staying with a family member. Is there support other than that you've received or that you've gotten so far after this natural disaster has hit you and the entire region?
Honestly, I haven't heard anything from Red Cross. I talked to FEMA this morning, and they said since it hasn't been declared a national disaster, they're not going to do anything. So no one has contacted me from my leasing office, Red Cross. I haven't heard anything.
And have you been able to reach out given where you are, or is that something that you're just waiting for to happen to you or for somebody to call you?
Honestly, I did a lot of networking yesterday at the Richmond Heights Center, and I gave my number out to a lot of people. And they said that they would help. They would try to give me some resources, but no one has called me yet.
Okay, well, you are one of many people, including myself. I'm in University City, and I know that I lost quite a bit of equipment, but it sounds like what happened to you was an awful lot worse, and I'm sure that you're not alone, not that that's any help, but it's really bad, and I hope that you're able to actually get some help as the days and hours go on after this disaster has hit the St. Louis area.
Well, thank you very much.
That was Camila Cage, and we are speaking with her as she stays with a relative's house. And you can learn more about Camila's story, and you can see photos of the aftermath of all of yesterday's historic flooding. All you have to do is go to our website, that is stlonair.show. And from one person who is directly impacted by the effects of the heavy rainfall throughout the area, let's go to the St. Louis Public Radio newsroom right now and speak with one of our reporters, Sarah Fentem. She's been out and about since the rain started falling yesterday morning as I was coming in for morning edition, and she's been reporting on some of the effects of the storm. Sarah, thank you very much for coming on St. Louis on the Air right now.
Hi, Rod. Thanks for having me.
Sarah, there was way more than just a little bit of rain. Even when I was coming in, I was passing cars that just seemed to sit in the middle of the road. Can you put the amount of rain into perspective for everybody who's listening who may not have been directly affected by this much rain? Let's just paint the picture for everyone.
Right. And so I live in Bevo Mill, and that means I didn't actually see the worst of the rain sort of comparatively to other parts of the city. Where we saw a ton of rain was, well, everywhere, but especially in St. Peter's, St. Charles, and some of the northern suburbs and some of the northwestern suburbs. We saw some places get almost 13 inches of rain up near St. Peter's. At Lambert Airport, they recorded about 9 inches, which is a lot of rain in any situation, but the fact that it came in such a short amount of time, we saw this rainfall happen. It just was dumped down in a matter of hours. Like you said, most of this came before the sun even rose, and that took a lot of people by surprise, especially here in St. Louis, where we're used to getting those like thunderstorm warnings on our phones, and we say, whatever. I've seen one, I've seen them all. This wasn't 100% unprecedented event. It completely shattered the record that was set more than 100 years ago.
Yeah, and that record was very difficult. Even I was getting ready for morning edition, and if you could back off your computer just a little bit, we were hearing a little bit of scraping on the microphone. But I know that it was particularly difficult in the overnight hours. I got a flash flood warning as I was heading in, and then I started seeing abandoned cars just on my drive into the city. Can you tell us what you saw? Because you were out and about while I was on the air during morning edition. What did you see? Can you let everybody else know?
It was incredibly variable. So some streets, it was completely easy to get into town. I drove up to work on Gravois, and it was, no issues. But then if you went on, especially we saw a lot of water on Forest Park Parkway. We saw a lot of it on Van Deventer, especially near some of the, like Coldwater Creek, down by the River des Peres. Just really depended on where you were. And I think that was one of the issues yesterday morning, especially when you're, going into work in the dark, things look fine. And then, you go around a corner and all of a sudden you're in 4 feet of water and you can't get out. And that was when we needed to see all of those rescue operations being put into motion.
And speaking of some of those rescue operations, I'm guessing that you spoke with some first responders. What were some of their biggest concerns or messages to the public regarding trying to stay safe during the inundations? Because, again, we might not actually think of the River des Peres as a river, but
No.
except when all of this water falls all at once and all of a sudden you find out where the floodplains actually exist. What did the first responders say? Because speaking of inundations, they were inundated with calls as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so the biggest thing that people say is if you don't need to be out on a road during a flash flood situation, stay put. Especially because, like we saw, it can come out. These floods can come out of nowhere, and if you're stuck in your car, that can be a life-threatening situation. And so, first things, you do not go out if you don't have to. And then if you're actually in your car and you see a road covered in water, it is never worth it to try to drive through that water because you don't know how deep it is. You don't know how fast that water's moving. That's another thing we saw yesterday is some of this rain can cause currents that move so fast. It just moves a car around, and just, 12 inches of water is enough to sweep a car away. So stay put, and then, don't risk it if you don't have to, don't drive through water. The saying they say is turn around, don't drown.
Well, that's good news at any time of the year or any time of the day. But as we were mentioning and as you spoke about earlier, it was difficult because a lot of this rain, and if you were an early commuter, you didn't have a chance. It was dark. You might not have seen that giant puddle of water as you were coming onto it.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially because, again, this was an unprecedented situation. And so we, we're not used to seeing 9 inches of rain fall in 6 hours or 8 inches of rain fall in 6 hours. And so when it comes to preparing for storms in the future, one of the things I've talked to some scientists that say these kinds of what they call severe, intense weather events are becoming more common as we, move into the future and we see warming climates that's causing these big downpours that happen and sometimes. And so it's one of the things that we might need to take more into account more is when there is a thunderstorm, there is a possibility now that it's more than just a thunderstorm. It could be a very serious flash flood.
And with those flash floods, there have been varying responses as we go throughout the region. Different cities and different municipalities had some sort of emergency response plan. And I'm sure that you probably spoke with some of those people. If people are in need of aid, do you have any idea, and through your reporting, were you able to develop a list or even hear about where the folks should turn as the emergency response plans were launched?
A lot of the people that I talked to have found connections at that Richmond Heights Community Center, especially because they are, their houses are flooded and they don't have a lot of resources, that they can use. And so everyone's kind of congregating in the community shelters. And that's where you can make a lot of connections with people from the Red Cross, with local officials. I know, our guest at the top of the hour said, local officials are really hoping for a federal disaster declaration because that way FEMA can get involved and that might be able to offer people some relief, and we'll be able to see how that plays out in the coming days.
Now, we're used to rain here. This is not anything that's unusual, but this level of flooding, it broke the record by at least 2 inches of rain on a per-day basis from some graphs that I saw. And with all of this flooding, there have been a growing number of conversations surrounding climate change. Because, as you mentioned, this sort of rain, and as scientists have spoken about before, levels of rain unprecedented before should be something that's pretty normal. So that's a ticking time bomb. But in our region and in our country overall, we've been talking about another ticking time bomb. It's crumbling infrastructure with bridges and overpasses that just got washed away or just got overwhelmed by all the flood. You've been out on the ground, again, reporting. What have you been hearing about the infrastructure and how it was able or not able to deal with all the problems that you saw and that were apparent throughout the region?
An interesting thing is, like you said, this was an unprecedented amount of rain in a short period of time. And, we already know that the roads here in St. Louis have problems. You just need to drive down through all the potholes, and they do their best. But if we continue to see these kinds of intense rain events, that's going to become more of an issue because the built environment is built for what we usually see. And when those conditions change, it overwhelms the system. And that not only includes built environments, but also stuff like just rivers. Like we saw Coldwater Creek yesterday, that was more water than that creek could handle. And then it flooded these people's apartments and now they're stranded. And so I think that engineers, I think the city itself, I think residents, they all need to take into account that these kinds of big storms are possible, and it's also possible that they could become more frequent.
Now, with Coldwater Creek, some of the listeners may or may not actually be familiar with that. That has been the site of a lot of waste that could potentially leach into people's yards now with overwhelming events like that. Have you heard anything through your reporting, at least at this point, surrounding that or other sites, whether they were Superfund or not, that it might be affecting the area and how it is affecting the area?
I haven't heard anything. I know that there is concern every time that creek floods that any kind of contamination is becoming more widespread. I haven't heard anything in particular from this in the last few days, no, but I can imagine it's something that's on people's minds.
And another question, is this going to be part of your beat? Are you going to follow up a little bit more with this particular inundation as well as infrastructure as it's becoming more and more apparent that the St. Louis area is not ready for something like this?
Yeah, I think it's something that's a priority for the entire newsroom, especially when you see a community so affected by something that happens so quickly, and you see, people in so much trouble. I can't imagine that it's something that we would stop keeping an eye on.
This episode was produced by Maya Norfleet and Danny Wissentowski, with audio engineering by Emily Woodbury.
Our production intern is Avery Rogers. This podcast was mixed and edited by Avery.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Our podcast proudly supports St. Louis artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.